In today's lecture, we'll be looking at data types and modifiers. So before beginning with C programming, we need to know the basic concept of data types and modifiers, after which you'll be able to write your programs. So let me start with this. So in a C program, whenever we want to store some values in our program, whenever we want to do some calculations or anything, we need some space in the memory. So for that space, we need the concept of variables. So until and unless you have variables, you cannot store any value. And in order to define the variables, you need the concept of data types. So as you can see here, we need a data type to define these variables. Data types basically tells us what kind of values we'll be storing, like whether it will be a numerical value or a decimal point value or maybe a character value. It basically tells us the type of data which we'll be storing in our program. So the basic syntax of this data type is data type variable name. So let me go to the next chapter. The data types, they are basically classified into two categories. The first one which comes is the primary data type, and the second one which comes is the secondary data types. Today we'll be discussing about the primary data types. In the primary data types, we have 5 data types. The first one which comes is integer. These are the keywords which are used for writing the data types. Like for integer we will be writing int, for decimal numbers we will be writing float, for characters we will be writing char, for long decimal numbers we will be writing double, and void. Void is a data type, but actually it is empty. It is not used for defining variables. It is basically used for defining functions, which you will be learning later. Right now we'll be discussing with these 4 data types. So as I told you, that data types tell us the type of variables which we'll be using. So each of the data type, they have a size. So each of the variable, they will be having a size, and that size will be dependent on the data types. So for example, integer data type, it is of 2 bytes. Float data type, it is of 4 bytes. Character, it is of 1 byte, and double, it is of 8 bytes. You can see here, these are the space, or maybe this is the space it will be occupying in the memory. Integer will be occupying an integer variable, it will be occupying 2 bytes in the memory. Similarly, a decimal variable will be occupying 4 bytes in the memory. As you can see, a float and double, they are approximately same, but double is just the second version of float, means it occupies a larger number. It is same, but it occupies a larger decimal number. Character, it is used for storing a character like alphabets or maybe any word, so it actually occupies 1 byte. These are the primary data types which we'll be dealing with. Their sizes, as I told you. I hope you understood all this. And the rest, coming to the secondary data types, these are the parts which we'll be dealing later in the later part of the lectures. So after this, you can see here data types, they have predefined size, everything is predefined, but there comes a concept of modifiers. I'll tell you about modifiers. So as I told you that these data types, they are fixed, they have their respective sizes, but there comes a concept of modifiers. The modifiers have nothing but keywords which are used for altering the size of the data types. You saw that integer, it had 2 bytes, right? We can change their size. Float, it had float and double, you saw their sizes, we can change their sizes. How? Through these modifiers. Now even modifiers are classified on two bases. And the first is based on sign, the second is based on size. So talking about the size one first, they are divided into 2 types, short and long. So when we are dividing our data types based on size, there comes the short and long thing. The short and long, they can only be applied on integer and double data types, not on character and float. So as you can see the example here, the integer a, actually how much it occupied, 2 bytes earlier. Similarly, short won't vary the size, it will remain the same, it will make it to 2 bytes only. But as you see, once we use long data type with int, the size changes to 4 bytes. So here comes the modifiers, they are changing the size of the data types. Similarly, you see a double, how much it occupies, 8 bytes, but as soon as I am using a long with double, it is changing it to 10 bytes. Here we cannot use a short with double because double is already very large, so why should we make it short? Instead we are increasing the size, so we are using long and making it to 10 bytes. So we have short and long. Again, I'm telling that we can use it only for int and double, not for float and character data types. So next comes multiplication based on sign, which is signed and unsigned. You see what is the difference in sign? Sign does nothing but only changes the type of value. I'll explain it to you here. Sign, we have two classifications. One, so now we are classifying it based on the sign. So we have two types. The first one is signed and the second one is unsigned. They basically change the type of value, nothing else, not the size or anything, but the type of value. You might be wondering what is the type of value. Type of value basically means with a positive number or a negative number. So when we are writing int a, by default it is signed. Signed meaning that if I am declaring a variable int a and I am storing variable 10, it can either be a positive number or a negative number. So by default all the numbers are signed, and this concept of signed comes only on your character and int value and nothing else. We can apply signed on int and characters only, not on float, double, anything else. So coming to the unsigned part means we won't be considering the sign, we'll only be storing positive numbers. In the signed example you saw, int a or int a, if you're writing signed int a or int a, it means the same thing. It is storing both positive and negative numbers. Similarly, coming to the unsigned thing, it is only used for storing positive numbers. When you want to store only positive numbers, you will be using this modifier, which is unsigned int a. And as I told you, these two concepts of signed and unsigned can only be applied on two data types, which is integer and character. So this was the overall view of data types and modifiers for today's lecture. In the next lecture we'll be dealing with the next topic of C program.